I saw a great post this week talking about how if as a salesperson you're trying to be less salesy, maybe you're beating around the bush, you're afraid to ask difficult questions, it actually makes you come across as more salesy. And I think it's a very important distinction to make that so many young salespeople do not do properly, which is you are there to make a sale. Let's not forget that. That is the absolute thing that we're trying to do. But if we're providing value, if we're consulting and solving a true problem, there's nothing wrong with making that sale. And so many people get, maybe even coming from the SDR world where you're cold calling people out of the blue and trying to ask them for 30 minutes. You try and find creative ways to get them to ask, and by the time you're getting to an account executive role, or by the time you're getting meaningful people on the phone and having a lot of success as an SDR, you're not pushing through and just asking the really difficult questions that aren't even offensive, but just need to be asked. Like a very practical example, and one thing that is very hard to navigate, and this isn't a hard and fast rule, but certainly as you get to larger strategic enterprise level accounts, one of the most difficult things is getting everyone that needs to be involved with this project for evaluation purposes, for purchasing purposes, etc. You have to make sure that everyone gets involved in that process as early as possible. And while we can sit here and debate the theory of the best way to do it, so many people are afraid to ask who needs to be involved in this decision. And again, it's not something you ask right out of the gate. It would be very off-putting to me if I'm a potential prospect if within 10 minutes of our first ever call, you're saying, hey, who needs to be a part of this decision? But if you've clearly identified value, you've done proper discovery, you've uncovered serious pains that the prospect is actually having, it is beneficial for that person to have everyone involved from the start. So one, if this works out, they look great. But two, when it comes time to test the software further, when it comes time to actually sign off on a purchase order, everyone has been on board since the early going and has seen all the technical validation, all the pricing conversations, etc. that they need to see and feel confident in knowing to move forward. So at the SDR level, one of the biggest things I see is, maybe you've had a cold streak of getting people to accept meetings, and understandably, if you're getting hung up on a lot or you're getting rejected constantly, it's hard not to have it mess with you. But what that translates to in the day-to-day as an SDR is I'll see different folks trying to kind of throw away the script that has worked for them traditionally and think that it's something they're doing wrong. They'll try and get over creative. They'll try and manufacture questions that have nothing to do with just providing value and getting a prospect on the meeting. So whereas previously, if they're doing well, they ask a quick question or two, they identify value, they can insert a little bit about what your company is doing and ask for that meeting. Now in the future, what it turns into is asking 20 questions. Maybe they got some feedback from their manager that they didn't get enough information to make it valuable for that person to take a meeting, which is great, but then they overcorrect. And what happens is instead of just trying to quickly find value and ask for a meeting, they're asking 20 questions. So what are you doing today with this technology? Oh, that's cool. Have you ever considered doing X, Y, and Z? And then, are you having problems with scaling? And really at that point, after asking maybe 2 to 3 solid questions, you should have enough justification to try and push for that meeting. As you ask more and more questions, the prospect sits there and they know it's a salesperson and they're getting frustrated because instead of asking for a meeting, instead of trying to create that value, you're now trying to play like this game of cat and mouse and try and find some magical silver bullet, and they can feel that. They can feel how salesy that is. From the account executive standpoint, one of the most difficult things that always comes up is pricing. Depending on what kind of tool you're selling, if you're more expensive, etc., a lot of reps shoot themselves in the foot by not bringing up pricing right out of the gate. Because yes, sure, it can work, and I've seen it many times before where you'll have a solution that works, everyone's on board, and then as it goes up higher and higher, the people that are detached from the project, not actually implementing and seeing the immense value, are now struggling to justify why they're gonna pay 2 to 3 times more than they were previously. What happens over time is you start to be a little more aware of that as a rep, but then instead of just asking the question right out of the gate, like, hey, one of the things I wanted to discuss, obviously you're using this product right now. If you do move to us, we do typically see an uptick in price. So twofold, I wanna make sure that we're aligned on the value we're bringing from a technical standpoint, but I also wanna make sure everyone that would need to be in the budgeting and approval process is aware of this price from the start so we don't get down the line and waste everyone's time. Does that work for you? That's a great example of a question that you can ask and be incredibly direct, and you're doing everyone a favor. Look, we don't have to beat around the bush that we're trying to sell a product. We don't have to beat around the bush that we benefit from them buying whatever we're selling. Of course, as a company, we want to sell more of our product. But at the same time, at that point, if we have identified clear value, if we have identified conceptually that our product solves a big problem, it makes sense for you to get people in the budgeting process, in the technical evaluation process, all aligned from the start. The flip side of this is when you're in an account, you'll get single threaded. So you may have a developer that is a huge fan of your tool. Maybe they came from another company, now they're moving to a new company and they're all about what you do. But the reality is maybe they're new to the job, maybe as an individual contributor, they don't have access to leadership. And while they will put a lot of effort perhaps to testing your product and trying to get others on board, if they can't rally their team, if they can't get other people excited about the product, you're not going to make the sale. And it's not solely on them. It's on you to reach out to other folks, to get everyone involved, to press that contact once you've built up the trust and rapport, to say, hey, the work you're doing is amazing, and candidly, one thing I see, I want to help you take this product into your company. But one of the things that I see is if it's just you or if it's just one or two people pushing this product up the line, it's very difficult to actually get it onboarded in the company. So who else can we involve from the start to make sure that they're seeing the value that you've already identified yourself, and make sure that we can get everyone on board as we try and push for a purchase and implementation of our product. Again, these are examples, but you see the difference. And I don't want to get too meta. I don't want to go down this rabbit hole of like dating as an example, but it's the same thing, whether it's, you're asking someone on a date, whether you're asking someone for a favor. If you sit around and beat around the bush and you're like, hey, I just had a quick question. Like, could I like borrow your car for like a week? Like they're gonna be like, depending on how good of a friend they are, they'll be like, all right, whatever. Same thing in like different contexts. Like if you just want something like, hey man, my car broke down and I had to take it to the shop. It's gonna take like a week now. Is there any way I could borrow your car this week? I'm happy to compensate you, whatever it is, right? Just again, you're asking the same thing, but you're being very direct. So in conclusion, this kind of comes and goes in waves. As an SDR, what's gonna happen is maybe you have some initial success, you find something that works, and over time, maybe you have a bad week, maybe you have a slower month like in the summer right now, and all of a sudden you start to doubt yourself. You get away from the script, you think that it's the fact that you're asking the wrong questions or whatever it may be, and you start to beat around the bush and you start to try and overcomplicate what you're doing instead of just asking the difficult and straightforward questions that you need to ask to get people to agree to a meeting or see value in your product. As an account executive, the same thing. Maybe you have some success in smaller accounts. As you're growing to larger accounts, it becomes more and more difficult to get large-scale strategic purchases without having numerous stakeholders involved. I think I saw a study where the average number of stakeholders involved in a serious purchase is minimally 5.4, something of that nature. And if you're counting on a single developer or a single point of contact to drive that all the way to completion, your chances are substantially lower. But again, it's not on them to bring everyone involved. It's on you to build the trust and rapport with the contact and have the ability to ask the difficult questions. Hey, I'm gonna be candid with you. I see a ton of value like the things we talked about, X, Y, and Z, but we are more expensive than what you're using currently. What objections do you expect, and who should we have involved in this conversation before we waste your time testing our product and get way down the line and waste everyone's time altogether? Conversely, on a technical assessment side, like, hey, it's great that you see value, it's great that maybe you use this product in the past, but who else on your team is going to need to see the value themselves or want to play with our product itself and get their hands dirty to actually validate that this is a successful solution? So if there's any call to action from this video, is think about the ways that you're interacting with customers recently. Are you asking point blank questions from the perspective of you providing value? If they don't see the value and they don't want what you're selling, that's fine. But if they do, if there is value to be had, you are there to sell, and you don't need to be shy about asking the questions that you need to ask. So anyway, just wanted to riff on that. Hope everyone's having a great week, and we'll see you next time.